USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for January 9th, 2023. Each week we look back at the highlights of the weekend and the news of the week. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th, 2023 at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Secure your seats at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. Last week, we talked about Alaska Anchorage. We go to the 49th state again. This time it's Fairbanks. They upset number one Denver on Friday 3-1. Pioneers got a rebound on that, getting the split, a 7-2 win on Saturday. But right now, Alaska is the top independent in the PairWise. As we record, number 21, as high as 16th at some of the points during the weekend. Now, here on out, it's all independents remaining for them, 10-2 and 11-1. If you do the math, they might be in good shape for an at-large bid. This is a pretty good achievement by that squad.
I think it's fantastic. You know, I guess in my own fault, had not paid enough attention to the Alaska schools until last week with Alaska Anchorage sweeping UMass Lowell. And that opened my eyes a little. I said, at that point, I said, let me go in and see where Fairbanks actually is, because, you know, talking to Matt Shasby, he had mentioned that what he thought about Fairbanks as a team, thought they were a really good team. And I looked and I said, oh, okay, 10. I think they were 10-7-2 at the time. And I said, okay, here they're actually in an okay spot. They're above 500 at least. That's more than you can say about a lot of other Division I programs. And then I looked and I thought I think at that point they were around 24, 25 in the pairwise. You know, I knew they had Denver this week. Yeah, you get a win out there. You never know. But then after this, it is all independents. There's a lot of games against Anchorage left. They have Arizona State in that schedule. I think LIU's in there. I mean, it is entirely made up of independents. Could they go 12-0? As you mentioned, at 11-1, 10-2. If you get to 10-2 or 11-1 as an independent, you know, now you're in the 22, 23 win range potentially. There's a chance that this could be a team that sneaks up into 15 or something in the pairwise, not because they're beating world beaters, but they've beat some good teams along the way. Now they've got the winning percentage to go along with it. You never know. I mean, they could sneak into an at-large bid. We've been talking. It's easy to talk Arizona State because they're the last independent to get in there as an at-large, and I think that's the, you know, we think about them as the kind of the gold standard of independence. But if Fairbanks were to, you know, beat Arizona State twice here, a team that has earned itself a little bit of equity in the pairwise, then you're talking about the possibility that it could be Alaska Fairbanks. That could be the team of the independents that maybe gets into an NCAA bid.
Well, Jim, you took about 8 things I was going to say right there. So I'm guilty as well. First of all, we cannot call it Fairbanks because we're going to get somebody that's going to give us trouble online. So I'm going to apologize for you in advance. It's Alaska. Okay. And
I have to sometimes distinguish when I'm also talking about Anchorage. It's like I can never say UMass Lowell and UMass because you have to know which one you're talking about. So I know that we're in the same situation here. I'm defending myself.
But you don't call them Amherst.
I got to go back and I would call it Amherst if I was talking about the two.
Okay. So can I get to my point, please?
University president.
Can I get to my point? I mean, gosh, we're sitting here now. People are going to get irritated again. Fairbanks, as you would say, Alaska, as I would say, I hate to burst your bubble. I think they're going to have a hard time going 10-2. A lot of travel involved. They got to go to LIU, who's been surprising. They've got to go to Arizona State. They've got Lindenwood, who we just saw did a great job against North Dakota in the first game, keeping it a 1-goal game. I mean, it's hard. Yes, we forget about Alaska. We forget about them in the state. They've got 6 games against Anchorage, Alaska Anchorage. I think it's going to be a challenge, but it's good to talk about, and it's good I think we'll know a lot more after the February 4th weekend of Arizona State. And then I think you can really start talking if they're going to be there. If they go 3-1, 4-0, because those Arizona State games are at home, then we legitimately can have this conversation. But it's good to dream.
Well, it's certainly been fun to see them in the mix. A year where there's a lot of teams moving toward the middle in their winning percentage.
And don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. They've done a great job. They're doing an outstanding job to go into Denver and do what they did. And like you said, climb to 16 and do what they did the week before against Notre Dame. They're doing a great job. I just think it's a long road ahead. That's where I'm saying.
Well, with the teams kind of moving towards the middle, there are some teams rising to the top, and one of those is Quinnipiac. Rand Pecknold got back from Canada with a bronze for the U.S. World Juniors team. A couple of home wins in league, Dartmouth and over number 10 Harvard, convincing 4-1 win. So they're now unbeaten in their last 16, 15-0-1, and perfect in the ECAC, where they're really opening up some space at 12-0. Polls are being tabulated right now. Should the Bobcats now be the number one team in the poll this week?
Yes. Congratulations to Joe Dume and Mike Corbett for not letting the train run off the tracks. Yes, they should be number one. I've got a lot more thoughts on this. I know we're going to get into it, but I'll let Jimmy give his opinion on the number one ranking before we do part two of this.
Yeah, 110%. They were my vote this week. It wasn't hard. And it helps when teams around you are faltering. Denver loses. Even Minnesota and St. Cloud splitting their series. Those are the teams immediately around you. Quinnipiac has gotten there, by doing something that's very difficult to do, which is continue to win. And you're talking about an ECAC schedule. They've now played more than half their games and they don't have a loss or a tie. A shootout win, shootout loss, whatever it may be. They have found ways to win every single game. And if I'm right, they have taken every possible point. They haven't even gone to overtime to win one of these games. They're stingy. They're still not giving up much defensively. And that went against Harvard on Saturday against the number 10 team in the country. That's even more defining in that little run.
Well, now that we're talking about Rand Pecknold and we mentioned the World Juniors, somebody's got to be the head coach of that next year. There's probably already discussion going on. Do you guys have some favorites in that category? Some names you just even want to just throw in there?
Well, first of all, I'm going to say the one thing that really surprised me about the World Juniors, and Jimmy and I talked about this right as it was happening. Rand Pecknold pulls the goalie at all times of the game to success, to it not happening, not working, success against in the ECAC championship, unsuccessful against Michigan. I was very surprised that he waited so long in the Canada game to pull the goalie. And Jimmy, we both sent the text messages to each other. I expected it at 7 minutes. I kept telling the people I was watching the game, goalie's going to be out. Goalie's going to be out. Different stage. So I don't know what that's one thing that surprised me. And I know Jimmy, you got thoughts on that?
I just thought that Rand Pecknold looked a little different as a coach in this tournament. Maybe he's trying to be more respectful in an international tournament. He's a fiery coach. If anybody's ever watched him on the bench, you're not going to keep him calm too often. And, he had two really bad breaks go against him. I thought 2 goals disallowed in that Canada game for goalie interference. Both, I thought. I understand. I don't know the international rule book. I believe that both of those would have been allowed in college. I've talked to some NHL officials. I've talked to some college officials, and all of them thought that both of those goals probably should have been allowed. All of that said, he just looked a little different as a coach. So maybe when you get into, your mentality of how you're going to handle your goaltender, maybe that even goes into it. And then the final game, a bronze medal game that they ended up winning in overtime, that was even a little crazy, just the way that the whole back and forth was going. There wasn't a lot of good defense. And I don't know. I think that he is probably more cut out to be a college coach than anybody I've ever known. It works for him in college, the way he coaches, the way he acts. I don't think he could take his show into the NHL, and that's not trying to be offensive. A lot of people can't. We've seen a lot of coaches try and fail. But that his fiery, not attitude is not the right word, but just his persona doesn't, usually go that well at the NHL level. And maybe that's what you start to see a little bit as you're in an international tournament where you're still dealing with players that are future NHL All-Stars. So I think, he is a great coach, one of the best I've ever dealt with. But I think he really is made for college.
So my choices, and I said plural because I go back and forth. Jimmy said that I can only come up with one, but I can't. So he knows where I'm going with it. I got one that has never really done anything with USA Hockey that I think would be an outstanding coach. And I'm not going to throw my name into the hat because I have done USA Hockey stuff. But one, David Carl, his success in one-game knockouts, I think he would be outstanding. And two, they haven't won in the last 2 years. And maybe it's time just to get that fiery personality that has done a lot with USA Hockey and has had that experience in the NHL and in Greg Carvel. I think those would be my two choices. And if I had to go out on a limb right now, but I'm not picking the coaches, that's for sure.
Now that you gave two, I think that I'm going to try to give two. And if Ed, you want to have one, maybe I'll leave one of the more obvious ones out there for you. But my number one choice, I think, would be Ted Donato, assistant on the gold medal team in 2020 or 21. I'm not sure. I get some of these years mixed up of what they call the tournament. I think it would be 21 technically. And an assistant again last year with Nate Lehman. That was a perfect team into the medal round. Unfortunately, they lost to a red hot Czechia. So he would be my number one choice. And then I know you and I didn't talk about this one, Schools, offline, but I wonder why Jeff Jackson doesn't get more looks at this. He was with USA Hockey for so long. Maybe he doesn't want it, and that could be part of it. But I feel like he hasn't really gotten enough kicks at the can at the big tournaments. And I'd love to see maybe Jeff Jackson get one of those opportunities at some point too.
Well, he did he did start the development program.
Right.
So he has done some of the world under 18, 17 stuff. But I don't know if he has done any of the world juniors or not. Not recently. Yeah,
it's not to my memory, and I don't know if he has, but he should get some looks too, just because he does have such a deep background with that development program and knows the roots and knows the players. Ed, do you have one?
Yeah, I got a couple names I'm going to throw in there. One of them, St. Cloud head coach Brett Larson. He's had some experience.
Yep, I brought that one up.
Yep, he would be a good one for that. And another one that I thought of that's kind of out of the blue maybe, and his head coaching experience at the college level is pretty short, but he does have an NHL background, and that's BU's Jay Pandolfo.
Good guy with a great American background. I think that he'd be fantastic too. And I believe he played in not just World Juniors, but some World Championships as well. I think that it's, he really has built himself a good resume through it, not just playing, but then as an assistant coach at the NHL level. We've had NHL coaches do it before, and Jay's no longer considered an NHL coach, but he's got that background. I think that's a really good pick as well, Ed.
Brett Larson was an easy one. I mean, that's a great call. We threw out some kind of, like you said, outside the box ones, but Brett Larson has done a great job in college. He's been on those staffs. He coached in the Olympics. I mean, you're right there, Ed. That's a good call by you too. Without us including you in our offline conversation, this was a 11 o'clock at night after the Canada loss. Me and Jimmy going back and forth, and I think we threw everybody out. Another one that could be, if we had the others receiving votes category like a poll, and Jimmy, you brought this up, with Steve Rollick.
Right.
But not a lot of international experience for Steve. But, Marco Siki at Wisconsin's done it a couple times and been the head coach. But Steve Rollick could be another candidate there as well.
Well, we hope John Van Beesbrook is listening and making some notes on these recommendations.
We gave 7. So, we can't go to, maybe we'll give 50 and then we'll get one right.
One more team near the top of the polls in the PairWise is number 3 Minnesota. We'll see where they show up in the poll this week. I'm sure they'll get some first place love, but they had a split with St. Cloud State. Speaking of St. Cloud, an overtime winner to redeem the split on Sunday. Logan Cooley with that. The win keeps Minnesota just above Quinnipiac and St. Cloud State in the PairWise. Should Minnesota get some first place love this week?
It may be, but it goes back to what I was saying about Quinnipiac, is that they were the team that finished this week with a couple of wins. Everybody else had some sort of a blemish in their schedule. And don't forget, I still say that the poll is a snapshot of what you've done lately. And not that Minnesota hasn't been great. They're still atop the pairwise. But when you look at the records, I just think a one-loss team as opposed to I'm not remembering a 5 or 6 loss Minnesota team. Quinnipiac needs their time atop, but I think Minnesota is a fantastic team. Looked like that was a really exciting game on Sunday in Logan Cooley. I think it was his 4th game in 5 days. Somebody pointed out, with some travel from Halifax back to the Twin Cities area, he had to be exhausted, but still found the energy to score a fantastic overtime game winner. So hats off to him, but a good effort this weekend from St. Cloud. That's a big, in essence, 4 points out of 6. I know it's not a standings when you have non-conference play, but when you're talking about getting a home win and then a road overtime loss, that keeps them going in the pairwise as well.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jimmy. Those guys that played for the World Junior team, Snuggerud and Cooley and the rest of them, they deserve probably 2 days off before they have to play again on Friday.
Well, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about a team that nobody can sleep on any longer, plus a little bit of a drop in Hockey East and somebody who has snuck back into the pairwise bubble. That's when USCHO Weekend Review continues. We're sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida.
All right, class, it's the NCAA Men's Frozen Four. Welcome to Fandom 101. Want to help your team rule the rink? Here's your assignment. Lesson 1, go big for every goal. 2, when you bring enough for the whole class. And 3, attendance is encouraged, but passion is mandatory. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Buy your tickets today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Class dismissed.
We're back with USCHO Weekend Review. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. Number 16 Michigan Tech, they won the Desert Hockey Classic, a 4-2 win over Arizona State in the semis, a 3-2 win over number 6 BU in the finals. That boosts them all the way up to 13th in the pairwise. They may have planted the flag as the best CCHA team this year.
Well, it certainly feels that way at this point. And I've been kind of watching Michigan Tech out of the side of the eye, trying to figure out where they're going every time. And I think that they have, obviously, they're in the pairwise at 13 right now, and going out into Arizona and beating the home team. That's difficult to start, but then a real quick start on Saturday against Boston University, hung on, but against a really good BU team that's been hot. There's no way at this point that you can't sit there and say, hey, Michigan Tech, let's pay attention to them. They are, I'm pretty sure that Minnesota State would like to argue that they're probably the best team in the CCHA. Let's go 1 and 1A here, but I'm going to say my 1 right now is Michigan Tech.
Well, I'm going to throw 1B in your mix, and I'm going to stick with the winning percentage within the CCHA at Bemidji State. They've got the best winning percentage in the conference. I mean, and quite honestly, it's not even close. Bemidji's at 6.94. And you've got Michigan Tech at 5.95 and Minnesota State at 6.25 within the conference. Obviously non-conference. I thought Michigan Tech really looked bad at the Great Lakes. I think they looked maybe coming out of break. They didn't look good. I thought that Michigan Tech was going to struggle going down to Arizona, but 10 days down in the sun and everything's right. And here they are at within the pairwise. I'm not so sure that we can plant that flag and say definitively. Joe Sean, I love him. I had Joe here in Pittsburgh with me for a very, very short time. We go way back. We've watched a lot of baseball games together, but I think there's a long way to go before we plant a flag and say who the best team is. Bemidji's played 12 games, and Michigan Tech at 14, Bowling Green, and Minnesota State 16. And the games in hand. You know what we say about them: you got to win them. But right now it's 6-9-4. I'm gonna plant my flag. If I have to plant a little 4th of July flag, it's going to be Bemidji State.
Well, let's turn to Hockey East. Before the Christmas break, we were talking about Hockey East getting 6 or maybe 7 teams ridiculously into the NCAA tournament because there were 6 teams in the PairWise top 16. Now that's down to 3, and UConn is right on the bubble, tied with 16th. Merrimack, not a great weekend for them, tied with Yale, a big loss at the hands of Brown. And BU, they slipped a little bit. Not a bad loss in the PairWise, losing to Michigan Tech. Providence ended up with not a great weekend either. BC, UMass, and Lowell are all 20th and lower. So we've seen the volatility even into January of the PairWise, but this does not bode well for Hockey East right now.
A rough couple of weeks, I guess you'd say. We knew last weekend out of conference wasn't great. This wasn't a horrible weekend, but it just didn't feel like it felt like another Mets weekend. And the wins they were taking, unfortunately, were against, bottom teams in the PairWise, and the losses they're taking were against teams that you'd hope that you'd get some credit. The Michigan Tech loss for BU is one. Obviously, Brown absolutely hammering Merrimack on Saturday. Some of these games were a little crazy. Merrimack hasn't been giving up goals, but they have not come out of break well. They went in as hard as possible. It seemed like they probably needed some time to decompress. Don't forget they lost their assistant coach early in the season when Josh Diaco passed away. And I don't know if maybe the break just gave them some time to reflect, and that can start weighing on you when you have that time. And now they haven't come out strong. I don't have a real explanation for it, but sometimes the mentality of a season gets, it wears on you. I don't see disaster right now for Hockey East, but I see a lot of work ahead. If they're going to get back to where we all thought they were as we were, as they were, waving the Hockey East flag right before Christmas. I know talking with Steve Metcalf, their commissioner, it was probably around the 15th of December. He said, yeah, I watch the PairWise every week. I'm always looking at them, maybe looking at them more as we get into January, February, March. Well, he might want to stop looking at the PairWise for a few days right now. It's just not gonna leave his stomach in a good place. But there's a lot of work left to do. BC's on the upswing. That's a good thing. UMass, they've been kind of heading down. Lowell, they've been kind of heading down. Providence was getting in a good place after they won their tournament last weekend, but then this past weekend, not the outcomes that they probably wanted. So it is volatile, and I think we think of the fact that when we look at the Christmas PairWise right around Christmas, New Year's, most of the teams that are in the top 16 stay in the top 16. But it doesn't mean they stay in there week to week. Sometimes you drop and then you got to play well, and then you get back up. And right now for Hockey East, the teams that play best in the league in the second half will be the teams that make the NCAA tournament as an at-large, with at-large bids.
How many opportunities of non-conference games they have left minus the Bean Pot?
They had a lot going into these last 2 weeks. They've used a lot of them. So there are some, but there's not a ton.
Yeah, so I don't think that there's going to be many opportunities. And if there are, they're going to have to win those.
The good thing is, though, Derek, when you think about their league games, they will carry some value because you're going to play teams that have strong strength of schedules. That is the one good thing about playing in Hockey East this year, not every year, but this year it is, because they do have strong strength of schedule. So they can still boost themselves up with league wins here. Are
you thinking, I don't know if they can get higher than 3 now, though, unless you get somebody from from outside the bubble winning the tournament.
I think they can. I think they can get 4 and possibly 5.
Oh, okay. That's why you're the PairWise guru, and you guys look at it as it's happening. And I'm surprised at the drop all of a sudden. And like you said, I don't know if Steve wants to look at the PairWise bubble anymore, but it'll be interesting. This whole last 2 months is really going to be interesting because that's really all we're talking about. You know, the funny thing is I was texting with another coach and I said, do you realize that you only have 8 conference weekends left? And I think that was pre to this. And I think you're probably down to 7. So this is going to happen in a quick hurry. And you're going to know probably within 2 to 3 weeks where teams are, if they haven't had their ship righted, and making sure that they're going in the right direction, where they're going to fall, where they're going to go, if they're going to climb or if they're going to fall.
You know, where the real volatility is in the PairWise is right around the edge of the bubble. Just third decimal places in the RPI are making the difference there. And that can shift totally out of your control. You can win what you need to win and somebody can lose what they shouldn't lose and take you right out of it. So that's why it means a little bit now, and it means more and more as you get to the end. And still, the last weekend, the last night of games, championship weekend, is going to still change things around quite a bit, I'm sure. So you could be looking going into the weekend, 3 teams and come out with 5. You never know.
And vice versa.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's when everybody is looking at, okay, well, I need them to win and them to lose, and everybody's watching all that kind of stuff. Speaking of the bubble, back inside the bubble and all the way up tied at number 14 is North Dakota. They are back above 500 at 9-8-4 with a sweep of Lindenwood at home. But that's one indication. That's a lot about what Jim was talking about strength of schedule being important and winning those games that you need to win. With a record just barely above 500, North Dakota way up at 14.
Well, that's where the Western Michigan, obviously, the win over in the Great Lakes really helps North Dakota because they're 3-0-1 in their last 4. They went 1-0-1 before break against Western Michigan, come out with 2 wins over Lindenwood. And now they've got an opportunity this week with Western Michigan. And that is the strength of the NCHC schedule. Western Michigan at 12. I mean, you go down the list, they're going to have a lot of games against high level teams that can help them if they're successful.
Yeah, we're also seeing that same effect with say Notre Dame in the Big Ten and how strong the overall RPI of the Big Ten is. Notre Dame's exactly 500, 10-2. They're still right on the PairWise bubble. They're number 16 as of this morning. So you have to look at, the conference. And that's why I don't worry too much about Hockey East, but they have dropped. They are now in the pecking order of conferences in terms of out of conference records. They have fallen to 3 and they are behind the Big Ten and they are behind the NCHC now. So it's amazing what a few weekends can do, but the biggest weekends we don't always think about them. We think about the biggest weekends of the year are in March, right? You're playing and winning conference championships, but the biggest weekends of the year still back in reality are probably the first 3 weekends in October and the first 2 weekends in January when you're back, because the majority of the play is not played within a conference. That's usually where your non-conference games come from. So those 5 weekends often dictate how strong your league will be and how many teams the PairWise will deliver in terms of at-large bids.
Another one that's right there that we're talking about still inside the bubble because of the strength of their league, Michigan State. Michigan State's 1-7 in their last 8.
Right.
And their 1 win was against Michigan. Yes, they have had some high-level losses, but if they don't right that ship quickly, Penn State twice, Minnesota twice, Notre Dame twice, Michigan twice, if they don't start winning some hockey games, you're going to see them on the other side of that bubble, in my opinion.
Yeah, you're one more weekend sweep from going from where they are right now, 14 down to possibly 2021.
Well, with that, we've got time for a couple of quick hitters. First of all, Frozen Fenway this past weekend, Jim.
I didn't go. I can admit that. I watched it all on TV. It's a good. So I'll get on my soapbox that I've been on many times about these events. I like them done infrequently. When they were doing them almost every 2 years, I thought it was a little bit too much. And I think that, it's been a while. It might be maybe 7-8 years, maybe 9 since they had done a frozen Fenway. This weekend looks pretty good. The women's game, they got hampered by snow. The men's games, the early game, I thought the ice looked iffy. The second game, the BC UMass game, the ice looked excellent, got cold. The ice, there were some times they had to stop it to fill in some holes, but that's the one thing that concerns me the most. I think for the players, the experience, fantastic, right? For the coaches, maybe that experience is there, but you also realize these games mean something. And a loss in a game against a team that maybe you should have beat, or you hoped to beat, or you would have, expected if you were at home that you would have beat, that hurts. And if that's pulling you out of a national tournament, that's one of those experiences that maybe it feels good at the time, but you look back and say, yeah, was it totally worth it? The one thing that hits me too is that, it's right after the Winter Classic. So you would hope that fans would be like, in the mode of let's go back to Fenway, or let's go to Fenway because we couldn't afford those Winter Classic tickets. The attendance was, similar to what you'd expect at a hockey's tournament, where the early game, kind of empty stadium, later game, better crowd, but still not packed, still not sold out. So I don't want to criticize anything anybody did to put on Frozen Fenway. It's a tough event to orchestrate. It needs to be limited. All of these types of games need to be limited, just because the conditions to play in are just to me, as an outsider, it doesn't feel worth it. I know the experience for the student athletes maybe is opposite.
See, I will go the opposite way. And right now in NCAA, they always talk about student athlete experience.
Right.
We played 2 games, one in perfect weather at Heinz Field, in front of 4,000 people and 68,000 yellow seats. And it was unbelievable. The weather was perfect. It was a great night. And everything was perfect. We played in one in 2014 or maybe even 13, in Toledo in a torrential downpour, where we had to stop at 10 minutes in the third period and get the Zamboni to come out. And it was miserable for the coaches. I had to change clothes in the middle of the second and third period because I was so wet. But the players loved it. It was awesome. And in the days where we're talking about student athlete experience, because we're not giving the big NIL money, we're not giving the big, the going to opting out of games and going to the NHL draft and all that big stuff. Is it all happening? Yes. We're also talking about a lot of these students that will never get the opportunity to ever do this again. So I will go on the opposite. We did it twice in 17 years. And we did it, I think one class got the opportunity to play in 2 of them. But I would do it again in a heartbeat. And I think the students would do it again in a heartbeat and don't care what the weather is, just because it's really, really cool. I mean, these kids get to say they played in Fenway Park. They'll never, ever get a chance to say that again. And I think that any coach that takes that experience from them or doesn't want that experience is wrong. We've talked about it when people don't want people to go to the Olympics or don't want them to go to the World Juniors, things like that. I think we're talking about kids still who may never get those chances again. I mean, Ed, you broadcasted the game in a driving snowstorm in Rochester. How cool was that for the players?
It was cool. And I'll tell you what, I see where both of you are coming from. I hate seeing games that are important in standings or maybe with NCAA implications being played on bad ice. Even national championships in indoor football stadiums shouldn't be played on bad ice. But, that's ice under the bridge.
But you don't know that, though. You don't know that when you schedule it 2 years out.
So here's my thought on that. You're allowed to have exhibitions during the season against NCAA teams. Make it an exhibition. Allow 5 forward lines and 8 defensemen. Give everybody the experience and have a game that's fun, but it doesn't implicate anything in the standings, so that if you have bad conditions fluky things or bad things don't affect how things come out. That might be a way to make it work.
That's fair. And I'll tell you, one of the hardest things that I had to do as a coach was picking the lineup for those games. Because back in the day when we did these, we weren't allowed to dress an extra player. At Heinz Field, we didn't have a pregame skate because we were at Niagara the day before, and the Penguins played in a stadium series game. So I petitioned the league to let everybody dress for warmups. At least they got a chance to do that. I agree with you, though. That's the hardest thing as a coach, because you don't want, like, can you imagine having a player that it's time for them to come out of the lineup? Because we all have those players that it's time for them to come out of the lineup, and you need to make a statement, or you need their just to sit in one game.
Yep.
Just to get their head on straight. And we've seen it. You guys have seen it. Coaches do it. Hey, it's just time for him to refocus and watch a game. Can you imagine that player playing 37 to 38 games that year, and that one game being at Fenway Park? I mean, those are difficult as coaches. And on the other side, you get a kid that plays seven games out of 38, and one of us is at Fenway Park. So, I mean, it's hard. And those are, I know you said this is a quick hitter here, but we could debate this one for a long time.
I do like Ed's point, though.
Yep, I do too.
The exhibition, and again, I'm not even sure when I guess that was something that could be considered when these were being scheduled. It was interesting to see in Hockey East, one game, the Yukon Northeastern game was a league game. The Boston College UMass game was a non-league game. So interesting to see even how that was handled. But I think putting everything to exhibition, I don't know if the fans maybe then think there's not as much to it, but I think that if you're just trying to give the student athlete experience, then I think doing an exhibition makes it a lot easier.
Well, I want to throw in one more, and that also has to do with ice conditions. This year, they switched the rules. They used to allow 12, 15, or 18-minute intermissions. This year, it's 12 or 15. And 2 weekends in a row, I saw games with 12-minute intermissions where when it was time to start the second or the third period, the ice wasn't ready. Very wet. And even in one period, the Zamboni operator had left a big path of water down the slot that didn't freeze up until like 4 minutes or so into each period. And, the ones I saw this past weekend were preceded by some youth hockey exhibition in there. So the Zambonis weren't even coming out on the ice till about 9 minutes left in the period. They're getting off with about 2.5 minutes left. The teams come out with a minute left. At the very least, if you're going to do some promotions, go with 15 minutes. But, after watching that, I'm thinking 12 is just not going to be enough unless you just really time things right. You get out there the moment that clock starts running and get off of there in time. You see pucks get stuck. You see wakes from players stopping. It looks like Fonzie on his water skis jumping the shark. I mean, you gotta have better ice conditions to start.
Whoa. How many people are listening to this? Even half of them probably don't even know who Fonzie is.
But they just jump in the shark and they really know exactly what you're talking about.
Hey, I'm the Henry Winkler.
There you go.
He's on a USHO podcast.
The original Jumping the Shark. There you go. Yeah. Nice reference.
So I agree. The problem that you have is, we've all seen it. We don't take the extra 3 minutes, but then we all stand there and skate around and wait for it to dry for 3 minutes. So I'm at times with you. If there's nothing going on and you got two Zambonis, sure, let's go 12. But if you do something on the ice promotion wise, then you got to go 15. Because you go out there, you stand there, you wait for it to dry, you get the squeegee out. And of course, the coach that's always not ready or complaining about it, you'll win the draw and you go D to D and the puck stops and somehow you'll end up giving a goal. I saw that way back when I coached at Air Force and at Wayne State, and you go D to D, it stops, the guy goes in and scores, and you're like, what the hell just happened? But I agree with you, Ed. I know this is a soapbox of yours, but I will say, I think that if there's something on the ice in between periods, you got to go 15. If there isn't, you can go 12. And I know the Big Ten brought this up, and we're all about moving the game along. But I bet you stand there and you spend the 3 minutes squeegeeing the ice or waiting for it to dry, and it all is the exact same anyway.
I want the game as short as possible. And, you know, the Big Ten in Red Berenson, we remember, you know, having him on in Boston last year, and he was, you know, pounding his chest almost. He was so proud of the fact that they had eliminated 2 TV timeouts per period. They had shortened the intermissions from 15 or 18 down to 12. And in doing so, they took, you know, almost 18 minutes off the game. And for a broadcaster, I know I enjoy it. I know for fans, they enjoy it. I love watching Big Ten hockey on BTN and knowing that that game is going to be over about 2 hours and 5 minutes after it starts. I mean, long reviews can impact things. Overtime obviously can impact things, but I love regulation games to end early. I like the 12-minute overtime. Intermissions. But the one thing, you've got to put it on the building. Put it on the teams. Put it back on the teams. No crappy promotions. Don't have little kids out there. If you want to do little kid stuff, do it before the game. Do it after the game. Find ways. Make your intermission about the intermission. Do stuff in the stands. Don't do anything on the ice. The 12 minutes. That 12 minutes is to perfect the ice. And if you can't get ice made with 2 Zambonis and dry in 12 minutes before teams come out, you have an ice problem. That's the biggest problem. It's the fact that you don't know how to take care of your ice. You're flooding too much. You're laying down too much water. All of those things. Like this goes back to building operations almost. So I hear what you're coming from, Ed, but if we're going to make these rules, find a way to also advise buildings on what the hell they should be doing.
Absolutely.
Learn how to flood your ice. I mean, no building should 4 minutes after the Zambonis leave still have puddles on the ice.
Right.
That you just laid down too much water.
Yep.
So I think I love anything that can shorten a game, because I will tell you that I have had 3 games this year that between video reviews, overtime, and shootouts have been closer to 3 hours than 2 hours.
Well, and I like what you said about the media timeouts also. Just one per period.
1 per period should be enough.
That's also a great opportunity for the ice crew to get out there and clean up along the boards and do a little work that needs to be done, because 3 media timeouts a period really affects the play of the game too. That's 9 extra shifts for your top line, right?
It eliminates the need for a 4th line. And I think that it rewards teams that aren't as deep. I think if you have great depth and you have 4 lines that you can roll out there, you're at a disadvantage when you're playing a game with 9 media timeouts, because those automatically, you know, bring out the opportunity to put your best player out there. I remember when Jack Eichel was that one year he played at Boston University. I can remember there was a game that was probably about 65 faceoffs in the game, and he took 55 of them. And most of them were coming out of the period and out of media timeouts. He was on the ice a lot. I get it. But he was able to take almost every draw in the game because of the media timeouts. So just put that in the back of your head too, because it doesn't reward teams that create depth in their lineup, because of, you know, I think that you should be able to play these games in 2 hours and 10 minutes, barring overtime. And if you can't do that, there's a lot of questions to be asked.
Well, we had a memo going out to John Van Beesbrook. Now we're going to send one to Jeff Fulton on the Rules Committee on a couple of things too. Well, with that, I think we can wrap up right there. It's been a fun conversation. USCHO Weekend Review is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Find your seats at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. And you can find our podcast at uscho.com/podcast. And you can subscribe on your favorite podcast app. For Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Weekend Review.